Hey, folks, James Azar here with the CyberHub podcast. It's November. It's the month I'm dedicating this month to our veterans. I've got a familiar face joining me today, folks. Patrick Benoit, the Business Information Security Officer over at CBRE, former CISO at, what am I forgetting? Why am I forgetting the name?
Cheetah Digital. Yeah,
Cheetah Digital. And just an all-around great guy, friend of the podcast. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me again, and I am really excited that I've got you fooled into believing what a great guy I am.
You do have me believing what a great guy you are because I know what a great guy you are. You don't have me fooled.
Okay.
We hung out in Dallas before COVID, like literally the month before COVID.
That's true. We did State of the Union, yeah.
We did State of the Union. We did rip up our speeches as well for the folks that are wondering what do we do. And if you haven't listened to the State of the Union podcast, you should go to our CISO Talk podcast channel. If you're listening on the CISO Talk podcast channel as well, you can go back to the State of the Union in February where Pat, Mark Hopt, who's the CISO at DataBank, and I have a hour and a half conversation around the state of cybersecurity. We did do a kind of midpoint of this year.
Yes, we did. Was it June or July? June, wasn't
it? June or July. It was at some point earlier this year that you, me, and Mark got back together and we're just like, hey, how bad were our predictions?
Yeah.
Because
they were.
Well, in came a Chinese virus and kind of destroyed everything.
But they still were pretty darn accurate. We expected chaos and we expected opportunity out of chaos, and there you go.
Yeah, I didn't think we expected a Chinese virus type of chaos.
I
think we figured our chaos was going to be election year kind of chaos.
Potatoes, right?
The beautiful part of doing the podcast is being able to have that lively discussion, and I can't wait for State of the Union next year. Because think of like July till now, and we're in November, right? Like we're recording this, folks, before November. Just for clear disclosure, that's why we're not talking about current events. But it's October and it's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which means we're all really, really bored.
But yeah, see, I mean, the thing about doing a State of the Union coming up is that we've got 6 months of the end of 2020 that everybody that wanted to be visible and make a name for themselves has decided that they could tell us why the pandemic has changed the world of cyber completely, and that it's so completely differently now. And it's like the next new buzzword is how badly COVID has driven us to a difference in cybersecurity, and that's a bunch of hooey. We still have to do the same things. We still have the same basics we got to cover. We might have different phishing attacks and different social engineering, but come on, guys, we're doing the same job.
Well, the subject line in the phishing attack is different, but the phishing attack is still the same phishing attack.
Exactly, and so let's not try and make a career out of speaking about how COVID has affected the cybersecurity domain. But that, I guess, everybody's got to find their niche, right?
Well, people enjoy talking and they enjoy headlines, right? Mm-hmm. And they want to make a name for themselves, and not always in the right way. And if we want to change that, then we shouldn't indulge these people who do this. I personally don't indulge those people at all, simply because you're right. Cyber is cyber. It hasn't changed. Most cyber folks know how to work remote and know how to work in an office. They know how to secure a computer, whether it's at 123 ABC Street or at 789 XYZ Street. That's semantics.
And it just triggers me because anytime I say something about it hasn't changed that much, there's going to be somebody that's going to go, yeah, but, and then I'm like, oh, here we go. But here we go.
And you know what it did change? I'll tell you this. You know what it did change? All the people who were complacent, it kicked them in the tail. And for them, That
No
was the
kidding.
change, right?
Yeah.
Because they were complacent.
They pulled back the veil and let people see
Correct.
what's really happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it changed. You could cruise by kind of half assing your job and, before COVID and everything was quite okay. Now you can't do it anymore because you're out and you're on the main stage and you got to prove that you know what you're doing.
Yeah. The lights come on and the roaches run for cover.
That is very, very, very true. So, Pat, you are a veteran. Thank you for your service.
Well, thank you for allowing me the honor.
And this month is dedicated to veterans. I think in a month where we're dealing with presidential elections and Veterans Day and Thanksgiving, and we have a lot of things people are always talking about being thankful. And the year that this nation has had and the polarization, it's time that we acknowledge and meet some of our real heroes. So, what branch of the military were you in, if you don't mind
I
sharing with
was
our
in the
audience?
U.S. Army. The U.S. Army.
And how long were you enlisted for?
So I was enlisted initially on a 2-year enlistment, and then my idea was that I had to become an officer before that 2 years was out, or I was going to get out and go to college and do it the other way. And got accepted to officer candidate school, went there, got my commission, and then stayed another three-ish, almost, so a total of almost 6-ish years, a little shy of 6 years.
So, one of the biggest challenges when I mentor and speak to a lot of veterans today is the idea of transitioning from military to civilian life. What was that transition like for you?
That's been a long time ago, back in the dark ages. But I recall the biggest transition over time, frankly, had to do with there was so much kind of I hate to say it, but like a lack of discipline in the corporate world compared to in a military environment. So, you're very used to a hierarchical structure. You're very used to, superior subordinate relationships. You're very used to getting the mission and moving on without questioning unless there was a valid, question that needed to be answered. You were used to standing up front with your team and leading your team forward and not just throwing your team out to go do the job. And I found a lot of that did not relate real well in the corporate world. It certainly was something I think that we've all aspired to and that should have been in the corporate world. It just didn't relate that way. And so I had to learn to kind of temper my I don't want to say temper my drive so much, but had to slow down a little bit to not be quite so aggressive at trying to get things done. In the military, until you get up into those high ranks, you can get away with talking frankly, especially when you're talking to senior enlisted who run the military. They're gonna tell you what it's all about right away and educate you as a young officer. So being frank and being open and transparent was real easy to do. Not so much when you moved into the corporate world, because there was a lot of nuance at all levels where people were kind of playing with their words and such like that. So that was the biggest transitions for me, and having to pick out the right clothes to wear. I think, although when I came out, it was the time of the IBM and Ross Perot blue suit, dark suit, white shirt, red tie, maroon tie, wingtip shoes, and so you could have like 5 or 10 of each, and you never had to really think about it. Much like being in the military in a uniform, you just grab whatever's off the rack and you got the right thing. I'm disappointed that's not the case anymore. I actually have to think about color matching and stuff like that. So
That's you. I still wear my black t-shirts.
yeah, well, yeah, there you go.
I have the most boring closet on the planet.
Yeah,
It's pretty much 90% black.
yeah. Yeah, and I have all black jeans because I could never bring myself to really wear blue jeans. They just seemed too casual. So,
Jeans, I could never see myself wearing white pants.
no, certainly not after Labor Day, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, white pants to me just seemed awkward. I mean, I remember even when I would see, shipmates in the Navy in their white pants, I'm just like,
A
that's
little
like
tough.
it is a little tough. Plus, when you come back, when I lived in Israel, the Navy, whenever the ship would come into Haifa port, I'd always see the Navy mates, the shipmates and the seamen always at the restaurants around the boardwalk in Haifa, and they're
Yeah.
always wearing their whites. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, dude, you're sitting outdoors on furniture. Your pants are gonna get dirty. You're gonna go back onto the ship. If you don't make it in time for roll call, your uniforms are gonna get dirty, and you're just gonna get chewed out. Just I don't understand why the Navy still wears white.
Tradition, tradition's hard to break. Now, you were in the service too, so we should thank you for your service too.
Well, yes, and thank you for that. But yes, I mean, that's why I'm doing this, by the way, because I feel like oftentimes we talk about veterans in cyber, right? But we don't really talk about veterans in cyber, and so highlighting kind of veterans in cyber and letting people understand that you didn't do cyber when you were in the military, though. There was no
No, not
such
at
thing.
all.
Was there such a thing as cyber when you were in the service?
If it was one of those deep dark three-letter agencies or something. Because no, I never heard of anything like that. I mean, certainly, sir, I was in combat arms, so I was in field artillery to begin with, and so my
You
first
were
couple of
12
years,
Bravo, right?
I was a 13 Bravo,
You were
13 bang
13
bang.
Bravo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
13 bang bang. Yeah. So first couple years, I mean, my job was hauling around ammo and and
Blowing
carrying
shit
it up
up.
back for the guns and stuff. So that was a different world. And then I was bebopping down the hallway in the barracks one day as a private E3, nothing better to do, which is the first problem. And I was walked right in front of the first sergeant's door, and it did not click, and he's yelling on the phone at somebody, and that's not the time to walk in front of the first sergeant's door. And as I stepped across the threshold view, he yelled, pulled the phone and said, "Hang on," and yelled at me. He said, "Private, come here." Son of a gun. I thought that was it. I was done, right? And I came in, locked up, reported. He said, "Boy, you have a life altering decision to make." Well, yes, First Sergeant. He said, "You can either be the S3's driver. S3, for those that don't know, is the operations, the major that's in charge of operations. So he's the guy that's in the field driving all the exercises and everything that's going on, all the training and such." He said, "Or you can be the battalion mail clerk." And I went, "Battalion mail clerk, First Sergeant." He said, "Good choice. Get out of here." I turned around and walked out because I was safe, right? And I'm walking out, some other dumbass, excuse me, private comes walking by. Says, "Private, come here. You're the new S3's driver. Go get your field gear." so, so that was my life altering decision. So then I became the mail clerk, and I realized really quickly that you need to understand your client base. And my client base was the mess hall, the personnel division that did the paychecks and stuff, finance. And so those were the people that when I went and picked up paychecks and went to deliver them every day, because we were still paper back then, I made sure they got all their paychecks first. And they made sure I had a place to sit at in the back of the mess hall with a little white linen table and a flower on, and they made me whatever I wanted to eat. And they made sure that my pay was never messed up and it showed up on time. And so that was the first big lesson in taking care of customer service, taking care of your client base.
That's excuse me. That's brilliant. So for our audience who's listening to you for the first time, tell us a little bit about what you're doing today at CBRE.
Sure. CBRE brought me in to build a global business information security officer program. And traditionally, that's been a program where it's a liaison of sorts between the line of business executives and the Chief Information Security Office. And so it becomes kind of a turnstile or turnstool position where I would learn everything that I needed to know from the CISO and what the strategy is. And I would turn to the business executives, the line of business, and say, hey, you're out doing your job, selling and building revenue, and here's what you need to know about security. And they would tell me about their strategies, and then you would turn back around and say to the CISO, hey, this is what they're doing in the business. I think this is what we need to do to help support them. And that's a very traditional kind of swim lane. It would involve, answering questions for clients about security, questionnaires, audits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I took that basic role, and then I said, I'm going to make it in the model of a sales position. So a traditional sales role is, you have an outside sales guy, you have inside salespeople and sales support people. And I said, well, the BISO needs to be an outside salesperson. So he needs to be the senior security executive that faces the client on sales pursuit and account management. And then the flip side of that is, you need somebody working on the product or application side of the house with the product owners to help them embed security into their products so that you have the right story to tell the clients and the customers on the other side. So I positioned it such that the BISO is that senior security executive on both the product strategy ownership side and the sales side. And then we have, the delivery piece of our process, people that manage all of the delivery of client assessments and contract reviews and so on and so forth.
That's it's not the traditional cybersecurity roles that a lot of people hear of. This is more for people who understand security but also want to be part of the business.
That is true, and I would also say somebody starting into a team like mine, they have to be very open to the idea of governance, risk, and compliance, because that's the language that we speak with the clients 100% of the time, and that's the go-between functionality we play between our technology divisions, our technology teams, and the client account teams, and we have to talk both languages. So, if your inclination is to engineering, cyber engineering, BISO is not a place for you. It's just not going to. It's going to kill you.
But if you're a GRC kind of person, and GRC is kind of like your favorite thing in the world, then the BESO office is probably something you'll really enjoy doing.
Yeah, and then the step from that is, if you enjoy doing that, that's the day-to-day stuff. But then that whole facing the client and facing the executives and telling a story. The BISO ultimately is a storyteller with only two goals in front of them. One is to enhance or drive revenue, and the other is to reduce risk. And if you can't do those two things, then not only is the BISO ineffective, but the whole security program is of no value if it's not contributing in that manner.
So let's talk about CBRE. Do you guys hire veterans? I mean, how have you in your career, because before you were a BISO, you were a CISO, and you've led a ton, and you've got a really impressive resume of work that you've done. How did you look at veterans in terms of hiring veterans? And then what would you maybe tell an employer who is considering hiring veterans, but isn't really sure?
So the biggest just given to me when I talk about veteran versus a non-veteran is that I have depending on what they did, how long they were in and stuff, I have a pretty fair certainty that they are going to be fairly disciplined, fairly organized, fairly process driven, fairly logical in the thought process, and they're going to be driven to accomplish the mission. They're going to be tenacious to finish whatever they start. Now, they may or may not have all the requisite like technical skills or specific skills to the role. Those things are easy to learn. It's like I used to say a long time ago, and sometimes got in trouble for it, is I could teach any animal, be it dog, cat, or monkey, that understood how to reason and make logical decisions, how to program with just a programmer's manual. It's so that specific knowledge is not as important as that that drive to me, and that just willing to work, that ethic and so forth like that. So I always felt like it's a generalization, but that when you talk about a veteran, that you get a lot of those things up front implied. You still got to do your due diligence. You still test for them and so forth. But that's always been a thing to me. You also get a level of this idea of loyalty. Like I tell my teams, I will stand in front of you and stop the bus as long as you don't throw me under the bus without telling me first. I have no problem with you going around me and saying whatever you feel like you need to say about it, but do me the courtesy of telling me first. And that kind of understanding of the hierarchy and of management and leadership and such like that is just something that is often hard for somebody coming fresh out of college to understand.
Yeah. You mean after 4 years of getting drunk and
on free will?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, kind of to wrap up this episode, Pat, what's one of your favorite memories from from your time in the service?
Well, for me, it really goes to the unfortunately or fortunately the adrenaline of doing some of the things that I got to do. Jumping out of airplanes, hanging off ropes under helicopters, rappelling, and all those kinds of things that in most cases, most people in the civilian community will never do unless they get into extreme sports or something like that. And that was just part of our life. It was just part of what we are, and you get used to that, and so that's the unfortunate thing is when you're done with that, you got to fill that somehow. So you start seeking other ways to generate that kind of adrenaline. So you get into cyber.
You do. Cyber has adrenaline.
Yeah, there you go.
Depending on what kind of cyber you're into.
Yeah, every time you get that call in the middle of the night, you get a little rush.
Yeah, every time you get that call or that message or that email alert that just like, oh, what is this now?
Yeah. Or you see the article that comes out that somebody had something happen to them, and you go, "Huh? Did we take care of that already?"
That's kind of going to patch management and vulnerability management, and I think those are 1-2 of any security programs. If you don't have those in place, then you're
well. And if you go back to the way we train the military, it's changed since my time, I'm sure. But so my recall of it though is, you basically in basic training, the whole point was to strip away individuality and then build it back as a team, and build back this idea that together you can accomplish anything that you need to accomplish. And but it all comes back to, we start at the very beginning. We teach them how to dress and walk and talk and do the basic things they're supposed to do, so that that's second nature. So then they can move on to the more advanced things that they need to learn.
Right.
Unfortunately, what we tend to do in technology, cyber specifically too, is we chase the next new shiny object, and then we forget what we were supposed to be doing in basic hygiene and basic 101 stuff. If we would just have a strong focus on identity access management, patching and vulnerability management and remediation, backup and recovery, availability, business continuity, the rest would almost take care of itself in a lot of cases. Right. And in most of these breaches and things that we have out there, it's because somebody failed at one of the basic hygienes.
It's always because somebody failed at the basic of hygienes.
Yeah. Well, there's the old saying that there's only 2 ways that a breach occurs. It's because somebody did something they weren't supposed to do, or they didn't do something they were supposed to do. That's the only 2 ways it occurs.
That's the only 2 ways it occurs. Yep. And it's typically always human.
Yeah, there's always a link in there. Yes, always.
Yeah. Brilliant. Pat, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for your service. Army 13 Bravo, that is field artillery for those who don't know. That was my original MOS before I was, 35 Lima. And so
Before you got smart.
before someone said, "Hey, you speak languages?" No, no, no.
Well, and I eventually branch transferred to finance core because I figured out that I could have a little more fun doing that than calling fire on targets. So
Although calling fire on targets is a lot of fun.
it is. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fun.
When you're 16 and you're speaking to a recruiter and he goes, "Hey, this is what 13 Bravos do," and they show you a video and you're just like, "Yeah."
That's it. That's it. Well, I appreciate you having me on again. I always enjoy it. It's a pleasure, and thank you for your service too. And thanks to all the veterans out there.
Absolutely, folks. It's November. It is the month of thankfulness. And so for me this month, I am thanking all of our veterans, especially because November 11th is Veterans Day. And so with that being said, to our veterans, thank you for your service. Pat, thank you so much for coming on the show, folks. That's it. More veteran-led episodes coming up. So make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned. We'll bring so much more here in a bit. Until then, folks, this is James Azar signing off and wishing you all to stay cyber safe.